Hi, everybody. So happy to be here with you guys today. This is going to be a regular thing from now on. Um, we're going to do regular Friday at noon Eastern time classes, chats, topics, Q&As, and I'm super glad to see you here. So today we're going to talk about walk-ins. And it was an interesting topic that came up on the thread the other day, so I figured we'd talk about it. And I've been doing some research and talking to some people that I know, and this is kind of what I came up. And I also want to hear what you guys know and think too. So the idea of the walk-in is that it's possible that the original soul of a person sort of leaves the body to allow another soul to walk in. And it can happen during times of intense personal problems, trauma on the part of the departing soul. And it's kind of like, it's hard to get a human body here, right? Like we have to stand in line for a long time and wait for conception to happen and go through childhood. And the idea behind this is that there can be an agreement between two souls, where one soul sort of finished with their lessons here, or they're kind of done with the body, and instead of dying, they leave the body open for another soul to come into that person, to that physical body, without the whole process of conception, childhood, birth, all of that stuff. And for most people that I've heard talk about this as an agreement, like an arrangement. That's done in benefit of the other, of both people. We're going to talk in a little bit about, like, well, what's the difference between this and possession? What happens if there's not an agreement? Because that does sometimes happen. But in the case of the walk-in, in this case, it's beneficial, mutually beneficial for both, for both souls, right? Sometimes the walk-in being individual, like, maintains the memories of the original personality, but may not have the emotions that are associated with that. Sometimes apparently they don't. That can be there can be sort of like, oh, I have always remembered that other person life, or they do for a short time and then sort of forget about it. And as they integrate in, they can bring their own mental, emotional, spiritual consciousness, and evolve the life, kind of take it in whatever path that they need to or want to for maximum growth and evolution. There can be some advantages of this. Like I said, childhood's tricky. We all get kind of wounded in childhood. So a walk-in soul can sometimes have, instant access to a body without having to go through the pain, trauma, conditioning, etc., that has to happen when we're born. And now enlightened beings like the masters, prophets, and saints have always been able to create a divine body, so manifest a physical body without being born. And some people say that's what Jesus did after, he died on the cross and reached enlightenment, and the resurrection was really just him appearing in his divine body. Many of the avatars and enlightened masters can just, like, create a body without having to be born. But unless we're not there, I'm not there, you're not there, then this is another possibility for gaining a body. Maybe it happens because the first soul to walk out has completed their task. They've done their work. They've done, or they've hit an impasse in their growth. They've stopped growing and they're just sort of creating more karma. So the first time that I really saw this happening in the psychic readings I was doing was a person who the walk out had been a drug addict who was like heroin addict and was very addicted to their substance and actually died in an overdose. And a person walked in, and the walk in, had no need to be addicted, so kind of quit the addiction. And we figured out that the walk out person, the person who left, had sort of gotten to the point where there was going to be no growth, no forward progress. They weren't going to really, didn't feel like they were going to be able to overcome their addiction. And they chose to leave because the soul of that person didn't want to kind of crash around on the planet and create more karma, create more problems. So they left. and went to some kind of like spiritual rehab is the way I can describe it, where they were getting some real help for their trauma. And instead of like wasting that body, a new being came in. Sometimes, so there can be like gradations of this too. So sometimes a walk-in can be a companion spirit. It's sort of walking along, like the original soul doesn't leave, another soul kind of join in. And there's many ways that can look. So in some cases, I recently worked with somebody where this was happening, and the soul was the second soul, the walk-in soul, was sort of like, I would described it as like auditing the class. They weren't in the driver's seat. They were just making decisions. They were just riding along. And in fact, my spiritual teacher, psychic mentor, Sharon Wilsey, she called these beings riders because they would ride along with the original soul. And sometimes the original soul had knowledge that that other being was there. Sometimes not. Sometimes it seemed like a spirit guide, or it would seem almost like, you know, not really like a split personality, but wow, I really have two sides of me, you know? And these riders are like riding shotgun, but they're not driving. Sometimes a walk-in can be like a fragmented aspect of a soul coming home, coming back and reuniting with the soul essence of the body. So this is what shamans do in soul retrieval, where it's actually an aspect of yourself that's coming back home to reunite with the original soul. And I've seen these riders in a couple of, you know, frequently in a few different instances. And I see them frequently when people are having an incredibly intense life and have really, really big missions. One time I met somebody who was a pretty well-known spiritual leader, kind of a guru type person, and had a lot of followers, was real famous. And he actually told me that he knew he had a couple of riders with him, because it was a lot of work, and he did a lot of work. It was super intense, his life. He did a lot of work of transmuting the energy of his followers, the karma, like burning up the karma of his followers. And he said his mission was so big and so intense that in order to kind of spread the karma around and lighten the load of what he was doing and experiencing in the world, he had other beings in there with him, like a group incarnation, to kind of spread out the load, the workload. And I've also seen, not somebody I knew, but somebody I heard about and tuned into once, who was like the opposite of that. It was like a kind of like a dictator who was, it's kind of real psychopath, sociopath, who was creating a lot of evil in the world. And it wasn't like a Hitler type of person. It was actually somebody who was more like the head of a big corporation. And there was all this, I don't know, damage being done, evil being committed, basically. And the same thing that this guy had about 5 or 6 riders in there to help him spread out and absorb the negative karma that he was producing. So one soul didn't have to bear all of that negativity. And it was really interesting because I could see how that soul was, had volunteered, was a pretty light soul normally, but had volunteered for this intense darkness because they needed to understand it. They needed to have, you know, this is a polarized planet, so we need sometimes people to hold the energy of the darkness, and we have people that hold the energy of the light that sort of anchors the polarities down here. And he's like, okay, I'll sign up for that. I'm going to have an extreme lifetime, a level of darkness. I really need to understand it, but I can't handle, like, his soul was like going to fragment if it was too much negativity. So it was a group effort to create that level of polarity on the planet here. And somebody asked me, you know, when we started talking about this, well, how do I know that I might be a walk-in? And some people just know, they just already know up front that that's what they are. They know, they'll be like, that's me. And they'll tell you exactly when it happened, and, you know, where they came from and what the other person was like and what it's all about. Maybe, and some people kind of wake up to this knowledge when they start thinking about the topic or exploring it. Oh gosh, I think that's me. So how do you know? You might feel really different. You might have and there's usually a precipitating event, like a near-death experience, surgery, coma, suicide attempt, near fatal accident, like there's some kind of or horrible depression, serious illness. There's some sort of traumatic, often event that creates like a like in the case of a coma or near-death experience where you actually do leave your body, and that creates the opportunity. So surgeries are often, or we go under anesthesia, is another time when that can happen. But you might wake up from a surgery, let's say, feeling totally different. You might not recognize the people around you. They talk about people coming out of surgery or coming out of amnesia speaking another language. How about that? Look it up. It's a thing, and they don't know why it happens, like why you would come out of a surgery with a different accent or speaking completely another language. They say, well, it's a neurological glitch. Yeah, it could be, but it could also be this walk-in phenomenon. Maybe you don't recognize the people around you, or you have lapses of memory, or you have flashes of memory that you don't understand, that don't fit your life, or you don't understand who you are. Like I said, car accidents, operations, long illnesses, shock to the physical body can bring that about. And what happens to the other soul? What happens to the walkout? Usually the walkout just continues their journey. They go back to soul world. They go back to heaven. Sometimes they go back into like a healing situation, like spiritual rehab. Like I said, where you're really working on learning the lessons of your life, absorbing the lessons of your life, and getting some much needed healing. And there are a couple of different kinds of walk-ins, like more variations of this. There's something called a transient walk-in, which I've never really experienced, but I heard about it and I'm intrigued about it. So I wonder if anyone's had this experience, where a soul will rent out their body to, and it's like Airbnb-ing your body, right? For a short period of time, and you go and take a little vacation over in Soul World, and the walk-in gets to stay in your Airbnb body for a little while, and get to live in your life for a little bit until the original soul returns. I've never seen that. I'm super curious if you know anyone, or you think you've experienced it. And then there's what's called a guest walk-in souls. So this is where you rent out a room, and this would be more like a rider. You rent out a room in your psyche for somebody else. It's like having a roommate or enjoying a live-in companion, to cohabit the body for a variety of different reasons. Might be to be an observer, or shadow your life, or take over for a little while. And sometimes they're a feeling of that the riders will just be in the driver's seat, or sometimes there can be this feeling of switching, like, okay, I'm going to drive for a little while now, you take a rest, and then we'll switch. And I don't know how that would go. I don't know if people who experience that would experience like feel like they had mental health issues or different kinds of personality. If you went to a psychologist, would they recognize it? Would they see that as like a personality disorder kind of thing, or is it harmonious? I'm curious about that too. And so all of these things that we've been talking about are based on agreements. Like, we agree to do that. So it's not really the same thing as a possession. But possessions do happen, and sometimes in solo circumstances. So we can be possessed by other spirits, the spirits of dead people, or the spirits of non-human entities. And that does happen. And sometimes those same cases, near-death experiences, comas, like if you leave your body for a significant amount of time, something else might move in, and then you've got a problem, because it's not an agreed upon thing. The two cases that I worked on pretty recently that were like that, one was really interesting. One was a person that had gone through surgery and received a bone graft from a cadaver bone, had spinal surgery, and had all these vertebra bones in their body from a cadaver, and felt like all of a sudden they were dreaming about seeing people like having another life. They were dreaming about things that didn't happen to them, or they felt like there was another person in there, and that was like the person whose body it was who died in some tragic way. That was fighting for, like wanting to move in and wanting to edge the other person out. So we had to do a removal there. I've seen it also happen in cases of surgery when you're out for a long period of time in surgery, and in the surgical room there was kind of a ghost hanging around. It's like, oh, there's a perfectly good body. I'm going to try to get back in there. So that's really different. That's a problem. It's not harmonious. It's not agreed upon. So Janice, you're asking, is that DID? Most cases of DID, like, what we used to think of as split personality, a dissociative identity disorder, are trauma-based. For the ones that I've seen, severe trauma makes you sort of compartmentalize what you've been through. It could be like, I would have to do more research into that. I haven't worked with a lot of people that have had DID. I'm sure some of them are possession, and it's a little more common than you might think, like where the spirits of the dead come on board and try to get in there. I one time worked with somebody who was feeling very depressed and it was an empath, not feeling themselves, and I was doing energy work on her, and I looked at her, and I could see this like weird face of a woman, like sort of floated, this old woman floating in here, and I was like, wow, there's a stuck dead person living inside you. Why would that be happening to you? And she said, oh, well, I'm married to a funeral director and I live in a funeral parlor. And I was like, and she had just picked up a spirit of somebody who was dead, who was kind of hanging on there and needed to go. So, that's a great question about DID. I would say probably some of them are. And especially some of the one, like the person that I looked at that was the CEO of a corporation who was really kind of like on the evil side, definitely was a person who felt like they had a mental illness, and felt like there were sort of, forces at work inside of him that he couldn't control that were not great. It would sort of look like an absolute personality change many times. You were a meat eater, and you wake up out of this thing. Now you're a vegan, and you change religion, you change your sexual orientation or gender identity. You're like, all of these things can be very very radical shifts. So if you have any experiences like this, I'd love to hear about them. I know there's some people here who identify as being a walk-in, and really like to hear what your story is. And because I'm just reporting what I know, what I've seen, what I've studied. It's not something that I've experienced. So if anybody has an experience they'd like to share, that, let's hear about it. And it's like hard to identify. It can be very subtle. So sometimes when I do psychic work on people, the times that I've noticed it are when I'm looking at I always see something's timeline, or like the stretch of their life kind of looks like a river or a road to me, or like a timeline. And I notice it because I see like a really radical split in the timeline. Like your life is going along on this track, and all of a sudden there's this like left hook, that's like taking you, like it's a real split in and I'm like, when I see that, I go, what happened there? Was that, and I ask myself, could that be a walk-in? So, well, thank you guys for such a fascinating topic. Put any comments you have in the thread here, and we'll continue the conversation, in the threads. But I'd love to hear your experiences, and tune in next Friday. Also drop some topic ideas about what you'd like to talk about next Friday. If anyone has one specific they want to talk about, I'm all ears. I'm like, just want to talk about what you guys want to talk about. So, and I have my own ideas, but I'd like to do what you want to do first. So anyway, have a beautiful weekend, and I will see you all back here next Friday. Thanks. Bye.